She was rejected
Can
on
you
a
be
Christmas
my new
blind date
mom?
until a little girl asked,
Can you be my new mom?
Snow fell thick and quiet on the streets of Boston that Christmas Eve. Twinkling lights wrapped around lampposts, and carols drifted from open shop doors. Inside Green Lantern Bistro, warmth pulsed like a heartbeat. The restaurant was packed, families filled every table, children laughed between mouthfuls of pasta, and couples clinked glasses in soft candlelight. Lila Hart stood just inside the door, brushing a few snowflakes from her coat. Her emerald green dress, chosen carefully for tonight, hugged her figure gently, the color making her blue eyes stand out. Her hair fell in soft blonde waves down her shoulders, slightly damp from the snow, and a touch of hope still clung to her smile as the hostess guided her to table 9. It was her first blind date in over a year. Her best friend Rachel had been persistent. "You never know, Lila. He's a decent guy, smart, single, at least meet him." So she had said yes. For a while, she sat alone, trying not to look at the time. The table was beautiful, linen cloth, a small flickering candle in a silver holder, and 2 polished wine glasses waiting to be filled. Lila checked her phone once, then again. The server came by and offered water. She smiled politely, waved it away. He was only 15 minutes late, then 20, then 35. At minute 40, Evan arrived. He was tall and well-dressed, but the moment he saw her, he sighed, an audible, disappointed breath. His eyes swept over her in a way that made her stomach tighten. He sat across from her with a slouch, didn't apologize, didn't offer an excuse. "So," he said, barely glancing at the menu. "You're Rachel's friend?" Lila nodded, smiling nervously. "Yes, and you must be. I'm Evan," he cut in, pulling out his phone to glance at a message. "Look, I'll be honest. I came because my mom won't stop setting me up. She wants grandkids. I'm not really looking, especially not for someone more," he paused, waving a vague hand at her, "assertive than me. I don't do well with that, and you kind of give off that vibe." Lila's smile cracked, then disappeared altogether. "I like softer types," he added with a shrug. "So, yeah, no hard feelings, right?" He stood before she could respond, brushing non-existent lint from his coat. "Merry Christmas," he said flatly, and walked out without a backward glance. Lila sat frozen, the sounds of holiday joy swelling around her like an ocean rising to drown her. She placed her trembling hand on the edge of her dress, smoothing the fabric over her lap as if that might quiet the shaking. She turned slightly, angling her face toward the wall, away from the nearest table of laughing diners. Her throat tightened. She blinked hard. The candle between the 2 empty wine glasses flickered gently, casting golden light against her glass of water. Its small flame seemed to whisper her loneliness back to her. It was not just about Evan. It was about every dinner date that had ended in awkward silences. Every man who said, "You're great, just not for me." Every hopeful beginning that led nowhere. She had turned down an invitation to spend Christmas Eve with her family for this. For him. For a chance. She'd told herself it was okay to want love. That being 30 and single wasn't a curse. That someone, somewhere, would see her. But right now, she felt like the only woman in Boston who had been stood up on Christmas Eve. A breath caught in her chest, sharp and painful. She couldn't stay here. Not one more second. She reached for her coat, but before she could slide from her chair, a tiny voice rose from below the edge of the table. "Excuse me, why are you sad?" Lila looked down, startled. Standing next to her chair was a little girl, no older than 3, with soft brown curls framing her round cheeks. She wore a red velvet dress and clutched a small knitted bear in one hand. Her hazel eyes blinked up at Lila, wide and serious. Lila blinked at her, stunned. The little girl tilted her head. "Do you need a hug?" she asked softly, and in that moment, something in Lila's chest cracked, not from pain, but from the softest, most unexpected kind of mercy. Lila stared down at the small figure beside her chair. "Do you need a hug?" the girl asked again, her voice sweet, calm, and terribly sincere. Lila didn't know how to respond. Her heart, already cracked open, softened completely. She managed a shaky smile. "That's a very kind offer." The girl nodded solemnly. "My name is Ruby. I'm 3. She held up 3 fingers. "My daddy says hugs help, especially when someone's face looks all droopy." A soft chuckle escaped Lila before she could stop it. She blinked quickly, not trusting herself to speak. A voice came from a few feet away. Calm, low, careful. "Ruby." Lila turned her head. A man stood near a table just a few steps behind them. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with short, dark hair and a strong, gentle presence. His black knit sweater clung to broad shoulders, and his coat, still dusted with snow, was draped over the back of a chair. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes, gray with a hint of storm, were warm, concerned. He stepped forward slowly, placing one hand over Ruby's small shoulder. "I'm so sorry," he said, offering Lila a quiet, respectful nod. "Ruby's very friendly. She doesn't really understand personal boundaries yet. She's—" Lila started, her voice catching again. "She's wonderful." The man's expression softened. "I'm Adrian Hale." Lila hesitated, then nodded. "Lila." Adrian looked at her for a moment, as if taking in the red around her eyes, the candle still flickering between the untouched wine glasses and the slight tremble in her hands. Without a word, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small pack of tissues, and set one gently on the table in front of her. He didn't touch her, didn't crowd her, just placed it there and stepped back, a kindness so simple it made her throat tighten all over again. Then he crouched beside Ruby, getting eye level with her. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "sometimes grown-ups feel sad, and that's okay, but when someone's sad, we have to be extra kind and very gentle with them. Can you remember that?" Ruby nodded slowly. "I was being gentle. I didn't jump on her." Adrian bit back a smile. "You were very gentle." Ruby turned back to Lila, her little brow furrowed in concentration. Then, as if coming to a grand decision, she reached forward and placed one small hand on Lila's. "Do you want to eat with us?" she asked brightly. "My dad makes really good chicken." "Well, not makes. He calls and they bring it, but it tastes like he made it." Adrian's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked almost stunned. "Ruby," he began, but Lila was already laughing. The laugh caught her off guard, full and real, warming her face for the first time all night. "She's persuasive," she said softly, glancing at Adrian. He rubbed the back of his neck, visibly embarrassed. "I promise she doesn't usually invite strangers to dinner. Not since last Thanksgiving." Ruby tugged at his sleeve. "She's not a stranger. She's Lila." Adrian looked from Ruby to Lila, hesitating. "If you don't mind, we'd be happy to have you join us. No pressure, of course." Lila glanced down at Ruby's hopeful face, those wide hazel eyes still locked onto hers. There was no agenda in them, no judgment, just pure, open-hearted kindness. And in that moment, Lila felt something shift. No one had ever chosen her like this before. Not first, not so instinctively, not so simply. She looked at Adrian and then back at Ruby. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I'd like that, very much." Ruby beamed and reached for her hand again. Adrian's shoulders relaxed, and for the first time that night, Lila felt warmth from more than just the restaurant's candlelight. This was not how she imagined her Christmas Eve, but maybe, just maybe, it was how it was meant to be. The host led them to a quieter corner of the restaurant, where a small round table was tucked beneath a frosted window. Ruby immediately climbed into the center seat and patted the chairs on either side of her. "You sit here," she said to Lila, "and you sit here," to Adrian. "We're like a sandwich." Adrian raised an amused brow, pulling out Lila's chair before settling into his own. Ruby placed her bear on the table like a fourth guest and began chatting the moment they were seated. "There's a cat that lives on our street," she began, swinging her legs. "He's orange and grumpy and stole my cheese once. I named him Pudding, but Dad calls him Menace. Also, snow tastes different when you catch it with your tongue. And guess what? I saw Santa today." Lila laughed. Really laughed. For the first time that night. She glanced at Adrian and saw a faint smile playing on his lips as he gently unfolded a napkin and laid it across Ruby's lap. "Small bites, please," he said, slicing Ruby's grilled chicken into neat pieces. He reached for another napkin and laid it carefully over Lila's lap, too. "In case the snow followed you in," he said softly, almost shyly. A waiter appeared with their drinks. Adrian passed a steaming cup of tea to Lila without a word, as if it had been natural, expected. Her hands wrapped around the warmth, and she looked at him. Really looked. This wasn't just a man playing father. This was a man who had fully become one. Ruby munched on a fry, then turned to Lila with her mouth full. "Do you know what I really want for Christmas?" Lila smiled. "What's that?" "A mommy," Ruby said brightly. "Can you be mine?" The question dropped into the space between them like a pebble in still water. Adrian froze. Lila blinked, stunned. Even Ruby seemed to realize something had shifted. She looked up at her father, then back at Lila, waiting. Lila cleared her throat, reaching gently to tuck a strand of hair behind Ruby's ear. I don't know, sweet girl," she said carefully. "But you're so wonderful. I think anyone would want to be part of your family." Ruby accepted the answer with a small nod, though her eyes remained hopeful. Adrian let out a slow breath and met Lila's gaze. Apologetic. "She doesn't fully understand what happened," he said, his voice low. "She was only one when her mom passed. Sometimes she talks like this and He trailed off, looking down at his hands. "I don't always know how to handle it." There was something in the way he said it, not just an apology, but a confession. One that carried the weight of being both a parent and a man, terrified to open his heart again. Lila gave a gentle nod. "You're doing better than you think." He looked up at her then, really looked, and she felt something stir in her chest, not romantic yet, but deeply human. Recognition, respect. Ruby, oblivious to the tension, reached for a piece of bread and nibbled it. Lila slid her hand across the table and gently clasped Ruby's small fingers. "You're doing okay too, you know," she whispered. Ruby turned to Adrian, beaming. "Daddy, she's not sad anymore. I did it. I fixed her." Adrian's face softened completely. He looked at his daughter, then at Lila. The woman his daughter had somehow pulled into their lives like a beam of light on the darkest night of the year. And in that one shared glance, something passed between them. No promises, no expectations. Just a moment of quiet, mutual understanding, gratitude, connection, and the beginning of something that neither of them had seen coming. Lila squeezed Ruby's hand, her heart full in a way it hadn't been in a very long time. Some meals started with menus and ended with bills. But this one had started with heartbreak, and somehow become the beginning of home. The second time they met was quieter. A small coffee shop overlooked the slow-moving Charles River, its windows fogged from the warmth inside and the cold December afternoon outside. Adrian arrived early. Lila was already there. They chose a corner table by the window. No one else was around except a young barista humming a carol softly. Ruby was with Helen for the afternoon. Adrian held his cup in both hands and looked at the water, silent for a long while before he spoke. "Her name was Lena," he began, voice low. "We met in college. She was wild and brave and always late." A slight smile tugged at his lips, but it did not reach his eyes. 3 years ago she was hit by a drunk driver. Just like that she was gone. No goodbyes. Ruby was still learning how to say mama. Lila said nothing, but her hand curled gently around the ceramic mug in front of her. "I did not know how to grieve and be a father at the same time," Adrian continued. "So, I did the only thing I knew. I built walls, around myself, around Ruby, around everything." He finally looked at her. "That night at the bistro, when Ruby reached for you, I saw something crack open. and it terrified me. There was no theatrics in his voice, no dramatic flair, just honesty, the kind that only comes from pain lived through. Lila met his eyes. "You're not the only one afraid of trying again." She looked down at the table. "I've never had what you had," she admitted. "Most of the men I dated, they saw me as an option, something temporary, like I was never quite enough for the long run." She took a breath. "After a while, you start believing it, that maybe you're the problem, that maybe you're not lovable in the way people want." Adrian didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix her with words. He simply reached forward, not to touch her, but to turn the silver spoon lying on the table toward her. "Look at the reflection," he said softly. The polished metal bent her image just slightly, but her eyes were still hers, bright, wounded, real. "If they couldn't see your worth, they were not the ones who deserved to," he said. "Sometimes it's not about changing yourself. Sometimes it's about changing who you give your heart to." The words sank deep. Lila blinked quickly, her throat tight. She turned her face to the window so he wouldn't see the tear that escaped. Moments later, the bell above the door chimed softly. Helen entered, hand in hand with Ruby, who ran straight toward Lila with a squeal. "Miss me?" Lila laughed and opened her arms. "Always." Ruby scrambled into her lap like she belonged there, and maybe, in some quiet way, she did. She nestled in, warm and safe, and within minutes, her eyelids began to flutter closed. Lila's arms tightened gently around the small bundle. Her cheek rested against Ruby's hair. Adrian watched, something shifting behind his eyes. He had not realized how naturally Lila fit into their life. Not like a replacement, but like a melody they hadn't known was missing from their song. And yet, along with that realization, came something else. Fear. He reached out, brushing a stray strand of Ruby's hair from her cheek. "I'm scared," he said suddenly. "Scared of letting myself feel this. Scared that if I let someone in again, and lose them, I don't know if I could take it." His voice cracked at the edges, vulnerable in a way Lila had never seen before. She looked up at him, one arm still cradling Ruby, her voice low. "I'm scared too," she whispered. "But maybe we can be scared and still try." It wasn't a grand promise. It wasn't an easy answer. But it was enough. Outside, the river glistened beneath a fading sky, and inside that quiet coffee shop, something small, delicate, and real began to grow. Not loud or perfect, but honest. Something like hope. In the weeks that followed, Lila became a gentle presence in the rhythm of Adrian and Ruby's life. It started with small things. A bedtime story, where she did all the voices, witches, wolves, and a grumpy dragon Ruby named after her neighbor's cat. Then came mornings, when Lila helped Ruby find a missing sock or tied her ponytail just right. 2 loops and a twist, not too tight. Sometimes Adrian stood in the hallway, coffee in hand, watching Lila lean down to kiss the top of Ruby's head before zipping her coat. They would walk her to preschool together, the 3 of them laughing in the crisp air, Ruby skipping between them, swinging their hands. There were no labels, just quiet warmth. A routine that began to feel like home. Adrian, normally guarded, started noticing things. The way Lila tilted her head while listening to Ruby's stories. How calmly she handled tantrums, not with lectures, but gentle presence. How she'd silently place a glass of water beside his laptop during late work nights. She fit, not like a guest, like someone who had always belonged. Then, one Saturday, Helen arrived. Adrian's mother was sharp, elegant, and rarely needed to raise her voice. She came bearing gifts for Ruby and expectations wrapped just as tightly. Lila greeted her warmly. Helen returned the courtesy, but with watchful eyes. At first, she stayed reserved, watching as Lila helped Ruby with a puzzle. But as the visit unfolded, her scrutiny softened. She noticed the quiet gestures, Lila wiping chocolate from Ruby's chin, reminding her to say, "Please." And most telling of all, the way Ruby reached for Lila's hand without thinking. Later, In the kitchen, while Lila refilled a juice glass, Helen turned to Adrian. "She's gentle," she said softly. "Ruby responds to that." Adrian only nodded. Helen looked toward the kitchen, then added, "Just make sure fear doesn't keep you from seeing what's already growing." It was at preschool that things shifted again. Adrian picked up Ruby one afternoon. Her teacher, Miss Carr, smiled as she handed him a crayon drawing of stick figures. "This is Ruby's family," she said. She told the class it's her dad, her grandma Helen, and... She flipped the paper. In wobbly letters it read, "And my new mommy, Lila." Adrian stood frozen. Lila hadn't asked for that. She hadn't even been there. And yet, she was the name Ruby chose. When Lila heard about the drawing later, she didn't speak. Her lips trembled. Her eyes shimmered. She rarely cried. But this gentle undoing, was too much to hold. That night, she stood by her bedroom window, watching snow fall like it had that first night. She realized she was in deep. Not just with Ruby. With Adrian, too. And that scared her more than she could admit. She began pulling back, just a little. She declined dinners, shortened visits, answered texts, slower. Adrian noticed. He didn't press. But he felt the shift. One evening, after Ruby had fallen asleep, he found Lila folding laundry at the dining table. She looked up, surprised. "You're drifting," he said gently. "I don't want to assume, but I need to ask. Is it because of me?" Lila's hand stilled on a tiny sweater. "I think I'm falling for this life," she said. "For her. For you. And I'm terrified I'm not enough." Adrian walked over, slow and steady. "You don't have to be perfect," he said quietly. "You just have to be real." She looked up at him, and for the first time, neither of them looked away. They were two people standing in the middle of something unexpected, something fragile, maybe, but honest. The kind of real you could build a home around. The holiday fundraiser was held at the historic Belmont estate, a grand, glittering affair hosted by friends of Adrian's late wife. It was a sea of polished shoes, champagne flutes, and polite smiles. Lila stood beside Adrian in a navy blue dress, her hair curled gently over her shoulders. Ruby twirled nearby in a sparkly gold dress, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Everything was going fine, until it wasn't. Ruby ran up to a small group of adults, laughing, and proudly declared, "That's my mommy," pointing to Lila without hesitation. The words, innocent and bright, sliced through the air like glass. The women in the group smiled politely, some exchanging glances. One of them whispered something under her breath. Adrian caught the name Lena. He froze. Before Lila could react, Adrian reached for her arm and gently but firmly pulled her aside, guiding her down a quiet hallway, away from the chandeliers and murmurs. His voice was low but trembling. I am sorry. I did not expect that." Lila blinked, unsure where this was going. "She's just a child," she said softly. "I know," he said, running a hand through his hair. "But these people, they were Lena's friends." And hearing Ruby say that, I panicked. Lila's eyes searched his. "Are you ashamed of me?" "No," he said quickly. "It is not you. It is the idea of Ruby thinking you're a replacement, like I am erasing Lena. I am not ready for her to think that." The words landed heavy. Lila swallowed. Then maybe I am the only one who was building something. She turned, walked back through the party alone, her steps steady, but her heart cracked in two. Adrian did not follow. That night, Lila sat by her window, watching snow tap gently against the glass. She placed her hand on her chest, where it ached, not because of the rejection, but because she finally understood. She had let herself be chosen, and it hurt to feel unchosen again. The next morning, a soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find no one, only a small envelope taped gently to the handle. Inside was a folded card, the front decorated with crayon hearts and stick figures. In uneven letters it read, "I want you to be my mommy, not the old one, a new one. Love, Ruby." Tears blurred her vision. Inside the envelope was something else, her left glove. The one she had lost at the fundraiser, now returned, neatly folded. She held it close to her chest. She was not crying because she was hurt. She was crying because someone had remembered, because a child had chosen her. Again, and this time, it mattered more than anything. That evening, she heard footsteps on the stairs. She opened the door before he could knock. Adrian stood there. No umbrella, snow collecting on his dark coat, his hair damp, his eyes unguarded. He took a shaky breath. "I messed up," he said. Lila said nothing. Just let him speak. "I was scared. Scared that by letting Ruby love you that way, I was betraying Lena. Scared that I was moving too fast. Or worse, scared that I was feeling too much." He paused, the words hanging in the cold air. "But the truth is, I choose you, Lila. Not to replace anyone, but to build something new. Together." A tear slipped down her cheek, not because she was sad, but because someone had finally spoken the words her heart had been waiting to hear. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, not as a guest in his life, but as someone who finally belonged. The snow had returned to Boston, quiet and soft like a memory finding its way home. Lights twinkled along the windows of the Green Lantern Bistro, casting a golden hue on the sidewalks outside. Inside, the familiar warmth wrapped around Lila's heart like a blanket as she stepped through the door, her heart drumming gently in her chest. She saw him immediately. Adrian stood near table number 9, the table, the one where she had once sat alone, holding back tears under the flicker of a single candle. Tonight, it looked different, not because the table had changed, but because she was no longer alone. "Hi," she said, her voice steady but soft. He smiled, nervous in a way that was oddly charming. "Hi." Lila glanced at the table. 2 place settings, and a third smaller one with a coloring book and a set of crayons neatly arranged. Adrian gestured to the chair across from him. "I thought it was time to come full circle." She sat down, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. "You remembered the table." "I remembered the woman who sat here," he said, "and how she chose to stay, even when the night could have broken her." The waiter brought hot cider for both of them and a bowl of macaroni for the little girl who would soon be joining them. Adrian took a slow breath. "I didn't bring a ring." Lila blinked, slightly taken aback. "Because I'm not asking for a proposal," he continued. "I'm asking for something more than that." She held his gaze. "Lila, will you become our family? Not as a replacement, not as someone to fill a gap, but as the woman who makes our lives more full, more real, more home." Her hand trembled slightly as she brought it to her mouth. Adrian leaned in, his voice lower. "We are not asking you to forget who you are. We are asking you to bring all of who you are into who we are." A small burst of energy arrived just then, red velvet dress swishing as Ruby ran from the front entrance and straight to Lila. She wrapped her arms tightly around Lila's legs. "Miss Lila," Ruby whispered, tilting her head back to look up with big, pleading eyes. "Do you want to be my new mommy now?" Lila bent down slowly, her eyes already brimming. "I've been waiting for you to ask," she whispered, and then she nodded. "Yes. Yes to the little girl who chose her twice. Yes to the man who had the courage to open his heart again. Yes to the family she never thought she would find. Sitting at a table she once thought would mark the loneliest night of her life. As Ruby squealed in delight, hugging her tighter, Adrian reached across the table and gently took Lila's free hand. She looked up at him, and for the first time, there was no fear behind her smile. Only peace, only belonging, and just like that, the table that once held sadness now held something sacred. A beginning. Morning light filtered softly through the kitchen windows, dusting everything with a golden glow. The scent of vanilla and cinnamon hung thick in the air, along with the sound of giggles and clattering spoons. Ruby stood proudly on a step stool, wearing an oversized chef's hat that kept sliding down over her eyes. Batter dotted her cheeks, and her small hands worked diligently to stir the mix in a big green bowl. "Celebration pancakes," she announced, voice full of triumph. "Extra sprinkles today. For the party." Adrian leaned against the counter nearby, wearing a plain white t-shirt and a navy apron dusted with flour. His sleeves were rolled up, and his smile was easy, nothing like the buttoned-up CEO the world knew. This was him, as he really was. At home, across the kitchen, Lila set the table, gently placing a flower in a small glass vase. Her movements were peaceful, natural, like someone who had belonged there all along. As Ruby began pouring batter, most of it missing the pan, Helen Hale entered the room. Her heels clicked against the tile as she took in the chaos. Flour on the floor, syrup already spilled, Ruby humming a holiday song slightly off-key. Lila turned and straightened slightly, unsure how to read the older woman's expression. But Helen smiled. She walked toward Lila, placed a hand gently on her shoulder, and said in a calm, steady voice, "Welcome to the family, dear." Lila's eyes watered. It was not a grand gesture, not a speech, but it was all she had needed. Recognition, acceptance, a door opening instead of closing. They all gathered around the table as Ruby climbed onto her booster seat. A tower of slightly lopsided pancakes sat at the center, crowned with a generous handful of whipped cream and a lopsided strawberry. Ruby picked up her tiny glass of milk, stood precariously on her chair, and raised it high. "I want to make a toast," she declared seriously. Everyone stilled. Ruby cleared her throat dramatically. "To my new family, and to Mommy Lila." Adrian's breath caught. Lila blinked rapidly, her hand slowly rising to cover her heart. Helen raised her coffee mug with a small nod, and even the usually composed Adrian found himself wiping at his eye. Ruby beamed, then sat down and began devouring her pancakes with all the grace of a storm. Lila watched her, watched them, and felt something inside her shift. She thought back to that cold Christmas night not so long ago. The table, the rejection, the silence, the overwhelming feeling that perhaps love had forgotten her entirely. But it had not. It had simply taken a detour. She had not been abandoned. She had been led to a curious little girl with a red velvet dress and a heart wide enough to welcome a stranger. Led to a man who chose to love not because he had to, but because he saw her. Lila reached out, gently tucking Ruby's hair behind her ear, then looked across the table at Adrian, who gave her a look that said everything without a word. This was not a perfect family. It was their family, not born of blood, but of courage, of choosing, of daring to open the door again. And sometimes, just sometimes, the one who chooses you is a 3-year-old in a frosting-covered apron, holding your whole future in her sticky little hands. The camera of life zoomed out slowly as laughter filled the kitchen and snow began to fall once again outside the window. This time, it did not feel cold. It felt like home. If this story warmed your heart, we invite you to stay with us for more moments like this, moments that remind us of the quiet miracles of love, second chances, and the families we choose. At Soul Stirring Stories, we believe that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from broken places. If Ruby, Lila, and Adrian's journey touched you, don't forget to hit that hype button to show your love, and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories that heal, inspire, and remind you that you're never truly alone. Thank you for watching. We're grateful to have you here.